Hi friends, welcome to the Shits and Gigs podcast where we keep the vibe high, the humor gets raunchy, and things get spicy when we talk about food. We are here for a special guest podcast tonight with my friend Lauren Burhans, and she is a board certified licensed behavioral analyst and currently works at the local Robert Gray Center, which is an ABA center for kids from anywhere from 1.5 all the way up to 7. And how many years experience have you had, whether it be with that center or just in general with the ABA?
I've been in ABA for about 20 years.
Dang, someone's got experience. I love it. That's awesome.
I like to call myself an elder.
Yes.
ABA.
Yeah.
And I started way back when.
Yeah.
When there was only a few places where you could even get a master's.
Yeah.
In ABA.
I actually went to school and I studied human services, so I did kind of integrate a lot of like special education and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I graduated in 2015, so yeah, like it's not 20 years, but even back then I felt like it was still kind of scarce to have centers specific for that need.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty
Sure.
cool that you've been able to dive into that topic. And what's been like the craziest transition for you to see like in your 20 years?
The craziest transition?
As far as like maybe what's available?
Yeah, so obviously the prevalence of autism has risen drastically, and it keeps going up. It's on the rise. We don't have a grasp of what is causing that.
Yeah.
However, we know that there's a genetic component.
Yeah.
If you have one child with autism, you're likely to have another child with autism. If you have a parent who's autistic, you're likely to have a child who's autistic.
Gotcha.
And so, seeing that drastic rise and seeing the prevalence and therefore seeing the need has certainly been, eye-opening and hard, difficult to watch.
Right.
Supporting families who get that diagnosis. And then also, I think just the idea, on the flip side of like where we've gotten this prevalence and this increase and this high need for treatment and care, we also have seen the autistic community grow up. Right?
Yeah.
And so when I started in autism services, there wasn't a lot of like autistic adults that were diagnosed, and that there wasn't really platforms to talk about their diagnosis and their experience.
Right.
And so, really in the past 5 to 10 years, we've had this community of autistic children grow up to be autistic adults who had intensive therapy, whether it be ABA therapy or some other form of therapy. Be able to talk about their experience, for better or for worse, and learn from them about how their experience went well, what really helped, and what was potentially traumatic for them, and how we as practitioners can change. And it's just been, I think, really wonderful to hear the voice and to hear the autistic community stand kind of loud and proud of who they are as a person and their unique traits that they can, provide to the world.
Yeah, and I don't know if I ever got to talk to you. I met Lauren at Elevated, of course, just like the majority of my guests, because we have a lot of awesome people that walk through the door. But I actually did past work. I was partnered with someone in high school through the Best Buddies program that we had. And typically it would be like a girl with a girl or a guy with a guy, just because at that age, like hormones and stuff like that are a thing. And sometimes people with special needs have a hard time understanding like the social norms. So they try to just keep it like gender neutral. But this poor little boy had no partner, and I was like, I have no problem being his partner. And I ended up working with him all throughout high school, just like taking him out in the community through that program. And then when I went to college and I came back, his mom had reached out to see if I would do past work with him. So I had been working with him, I want to say 10 years, and then we opened Elevated. And it was kind of a nice transition because I was working with him several days a week, and then COVID happened when we also opened Elevated. So, and unfortunately his dad wasn't in the best health, so like his mom like completely locked them down, which we all were for a while, but it was kind of it was a good transition to kind of end that chapter. But I still FaceTime with him every Tuesday because I just can't get enough. He's basically a brother at this point.
I mean,
but it
I've
is
run
cool,
into
like
students that I've had, when I was working as a special ed teacher, or even students I've had that I was working as a paraprofessional when I was really early on in my career. I've run into them just on the street even.
Yeah.
Or sometimes parents have reached out on Facebook later on, and
Yeah.
it's so nice to, see. I work with such a young age specifically, and so it's really nice to see who they grow up to become.
Right. And they never forget you.
No.
That's my favorite part of that about that community is no one will ever appreciate your time more than those kids.
Yes.
For like their entire life. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And so as far as the BCBA, you had mentioned that's more of like a scientific approach, which if I remember correctly, do you guys do like a lot of habit like tracking and things of that nature, or what's like the main like principles behind your approach now that you really embrace?
So it's a scientific approach to parenting, it's behavior change. And so, when you talk to a behavior analyst, I'm sure pretty much any behavior analyst will say, like, behavior is behavior. And you can't really, anything that I look at, I see it through a behavior analytic lens. The reason why we stop at stop signs, the reason why we utilize crosswalks.
Yeah.
All of that, I see through a behavior analytic lens. And so there's behavior analysts that work for large corporations like Toyota or Ford, that do operational behavior management on a corporate level. So I just think ABA is so ingrained in who I am as a person. When I went to school and sort of stumbled upon an ABA class, I was like, oh, of course, this makes total sense.
Yeah.
It just felt like second nature to me. And so I utilize that approach in, my special education background, but also in my parenting.
Yeah.
And then how I then coach parents both in my private practice and in my work at the center.
Gotcha.
And so, we utilize the principles of ABA and a scientific approach. We approach things with curiosity.
Yeah.
We use a scientific lens in the sense that we are going to come up with a hypothesis and we're going to test it out. We're going to take a lot of data.
Yeah.
And we're going to see, is that working? Is that not working? We change a variable and then, keep moving forward. So we try to be really objective and measurable and make sure that we're using the data to drive our decision making.
Yeah, and I would assume that each approach is individualized because every kid is different.
Yeah.
Is there something that you find is a very common habit that you are reworking in the center or like the age group that you're working with specifically?
Yeah, so with our age group in particular, we are working a lot on communication skills is probably the number one.
Which is funny because I had that down. So communication is huge for my husband and I.
Yeah.
And even with our like atypical child, I feel like communication is the biggest barrier, especially in those first 2 years.
Yeah.
So being able to find ways to like cope with like not understanding what he wants or needs and like now he's gotten on to like some sign language, which has been a breakthrough in a way because like all right, I have an idea of what you need. So it's just communication, I feel like, is big for any parent, whether it be someone with like an atypical child or someone on the spectrum. So what are your like go-to techniques, I guess, for communication? I mean, again, it really depends on the child, but anything in particular that stands out?
So I think when we think about communication as a whole, we think mostly about vocal communication.
Yeah.
And in the behavioral analytic world, we kind of separate vocal from verbal communication. And then we also have nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
And so a child can be non-vocal while also being verbal. And so when we teach a non-vocal child to communicate, we usually teach them to communicate in pictures. We could teach them to communicate using sign language. So we count that as a verbal form of communication. I mostly utilize something called the Picture Exchange Communication System. Stands
PECS, right?
PECS, exactly. And PECS has a ton of research behind it. It was developed by a speech and language pathologist and a behavior analyst, and it, I think it was developed back in the 70s or 80s. So it has years and years of evidence-based practice behind it. And I have, my own anecdotal evidence to say that, we're able to get kids communicating very quickly using picture exchange.
And with my human services, I actually focused on speech and language. So
awesome.
when
Cool.
I did my internship, I was in the school setting. And I feel like a lot of nonverbal kids we ended up utilizing that because it's second to none, really.
Yeah, and it's got such a specific protocol. And if you follow the protocol, it really is like magic.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see it
feels
transform.
Like
Yeah, for
it
real.
It just works so quickly and so amazing. And when you see that child be able to communicate their wants and needs, there's such a shift.
There is.
It's one of the most important skills that I think that we work on teaching.
Right, because being able to communicate and have like your needs met because of that relieves so much stress. No more need to tantrum, or at least as much, maybe.
Yeah. We also differentiate talking from communicating. So some clients utilize an AAC device, so a different form of augmentative communication where you are utilizing a device and you are pressing a button and it's speaking for you.
Okay.
And so this episode brought to you by...
Oh yeah, Lauren brought... Yeah, Athletic Beer, you said it was non-alcoholic?
It's
I was trying it anyways.
And it's made in Connecticut, and...
It's pretty refreshing.
It's a B corporation. So
what does that mean? Oh, B, like as in bumblebees? Or no?
B as in...
I don't drink that much. B for benefit?
They
Please
give back
give us
a
a
portion
scoop.
of their proceeds.
Oh,
Tom's, Patagonia.
so fun. I mean, where is it labeled like?
Where does it what?
Does it say the label for that somewhere?
It should say B somewhere. I don't see it. It might be on the box.
So I didn't know
not
that
on the
was...
can.
All right, I'll have to pay attention to that stuff. That's so cool.
It's
Thanks for
such-
treating us to this little refreshing drink.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, as I spill it everywhere. It's all right.
Oh, no.
All right. And we already went over how long... We already banged out a lot of these points. Cool.
I know.
And then you brought up attachment theory, which is something that you've practiced more recently or just for the long haul?
Just starting to learn more about attachment theory. But,
Okay.
you know, when we talk about the different approaches to working with the autistic population or just, you know, parenting, I think, in general, or interpersonal relationships, even with like your coworkers, your friends, your family, all of these things have sort of like this thread that weaves through them. So I think the biggest thread is, you know, making sure that you have compassion, making sure that you're forming, you know, whether you call it a secure attachment or you call it a reinforcer history, whether you call it pairing or whether, you know, there's so many different words that we could use.
Yeah.
But essentially what we're doing is creating connections, true connections with our children, with our friends, with our coworkers, and treating someone like a human. You know, and I think with regards to attachment theory, sort of where that comes in is that, you know, that theory of that every child or every young person comes into this world seeking a secure attachment with their caregiver or with a person, but typically it's with their caregiver, at least initially. And if they can form that secure attachment, it lays the foundation for their ability to have interpersonal relationships for the rest of their lives.
Got it. Okay.
When we're working with this really young population of children, whether we're working with a neurotypical population as parents or working with the autistic population as clinicians, we want to be helping to support that secure attachment. We want to make sure that we're taking into consideration their needs, right? Their wants, their needs, their, you know, past trauma, their current preferences, and that we are working to pair ourselves with reinforcement, to pair ourselves with fun and love and compassion and kindness, and that they are willingly wanting to work with us. And to be with us. So all of that it all just comes together.
Which I really love that, because for me, like we just briefly talked about prior to starting, I am big on just like those genuine connections and just really taking a second to listen to people. Because even at the nutrition club, we're basically like a cafe if you were to think about it, and it's like very quick interactions, but I feel like what makes us stand out the most is that we genuinely attempt to have a real conversation with people, which is so fun. And it makes my day go by faster, and I like genuinely then look forward to the next visit. And it's just like a kind-hearted experience for everyone, I guess.
It's like a new age go to sit at the bar.
Yeah, right.
Hang out with the bartender.
Exactly.
Spill all your feelings.
Yeah. Now, I will say, though, as a mom, I felt like I didn't have, personally, that, like, emotional attachment. Probably, literally, like, the day after his first birthday, my husband and I had this, like, super emotional moment in the kitchen where we just, like, sobbed because we watched a reel of, like, where I put bits and pieces of his first year together. And it, like, just took a moment to actually watch it. And, like, you're literally watching a human, like, evolutionize in front of you. It's, like, so crazy.
Yeah.
So then I was like, but that's, like, our person. And it was just, like, a weird feeling. So, like, for the parents that are maybe having that hard time themselves, like, forming that attachment, do you have any tips for those people? For, like, nurturing?
Geez, I think, I don't know. I'm definitely no expert in attachment theory.
Yeah.
I'm just starting to learn that with how it relates to sort of other things that I've been learning about. But when looking into building a connection with your child or just with another person, it's all about sort of finding, I guess, mutual interests.
Yeah.
Things that you both are interested in, things that you both feel passionate about. It's also about just listening, I think.
Yeah.
You know, even now, and I know sometimes, you know, there's a lot of mom guilt when you first have your baby.
Yeah.
And I think the world has created this sort of false
a lot
idea,
of pressure.
Concept of like you're gonna have this child and you're just gonna be so bonded
Yeah.
with them immediately.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
like, bonding with someone, with a person, just because they grew in your belly doesn't mean that you're gonna have this immediate bond.
Right.
With them.
Yeah.
Your pregnancy could have been really hard.
Right.
Your birth could have been really traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
All three of my children's pregnancies and birth deliveries were totally different.
Oh, really?
And so I think, you know, even now, you know, my oldest is 7. And
Yeah.
so even now sometimes I'm still feeling disconnected from him. He's becoming his own person.
Yeah.
And how do I maintain that attachment, maintain that bond? I want to approach it and make sure that I'm not responding in a way that would make him feel shame.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm responding in a way that would make him, we'll talk a little bit about trauma-informed care and assent-based care, but I want, you know, when we talk about assent, we talk about the willingness of someone to be with you, to want to
like a wanting,
share.
yeah.
And so I want to make sure that, you know, he feels open, and I'm not always great at this for sure, hence imperfect parenting.
Yes.
But,
no one's perfect. Perfect's overrated.
yeah, you want to, I think, sometimes just asking questions and then listening. And so now what I try to do is, you know, what was your favorite part of the day today?
Yeah.
We try to do like kind of a wrap up at dinner. We make sure that we all have dinner together.
That's
we
nice.
do what we call peaks and pits.
Oh.
And so we talk about sort of your highs and lows of the day.
I love that.
Yeah. And then, you know, we talk about, you know, what was your favorite subject today? Or what did you do at recess? Who did you play with? Or something, what went really well today? What made you feel proud of yourself today? And try to create connection by truly listening.
Yeah.
You know, and you can do that with a child who's nonverbal.
Oh, yeah,
right?
for sure.
You know, when you're thinking about doing it with a younger child, like an infant.
Yeah.
Or you're talking about doing it with a child with a disability of some kind. Maybe that child is lining up cars, you know, or they're I just did an initial assessment with a child who really enjoyed organizing things by color.
Oh, really?
And then
it's so interesting to find their niches.
Yeah, we moved on to playing with animals, and then she was organizing the animals by, you know, where they lived.
Oh,
you know, like
cool.
Ocean animals, farm animals.
Yeah.
Like zoo or that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And it was cool. So I just participated in her activity.
Yeah.
You know, alongside her. You know, oh, can I help? This one's blue. Can I put it with the blues? And you know, engaging in that activity that made her feel safe and comfortable and brought her joy. Engaging in that activity with her and finding the joy together in that activity. And so, you know, if you have a child, you know, you observe what they're interested in, and then again, this is part of pairing. It's part of building a reinforcement history, and creating that connection. It's like, what can I do? I can observe what you're interested in, assess your preferences, and then share with you in those preferred items or activities to build that connection.
So cool. I love that stuff. What else? I'm trying to think. I don't know. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Like you said, you're just trying to be a kind human, be genuinely invested in other people's interests, no matter who it is, and you're bound to like be able to build that connection through that. Some of the things that I've learned to like really love with Cam.
It's self-explanatory, but it doesn't always feel like second nature.
No, it doesn't. Like, you have to be present for it. Yeah. Like, you really have to be present and intentional about doing it, for sure. And I think one thing for me, too, especially, I'm sure I'm not the only one, also fighting the urge to, like, capture the moments and just be present for the moment is, like, so hard sometimes, because I feel like everyone's just, like, addicted to their phones because it's just built that way. And everyone, like, yes, you don't want to, like, capture the moment, but then, like, if you're have your phone, like, then it's distracting to them, and, like, they're not really in the activity anymore. So I've been really trying to just, like, put my phone away and, like, be in the moment, especially on my days off where I'm, like, at home with him.
Partners need to be taken
Maybe I just need to get, like, some floating camera or something that can do all the work for me, so then I don't have to worry about it. But,
I had a thought, and of course, part two, I think when we talk about, this feels like second nature, it feels like common sense, but it doesn't always feel natural. I think part of when I'm working with parents, specifically, is also teaching the parent, this reparenting of yourself. And when we
I love this concept when you told me about that.
Yeah, so when we talk about, being present in the moment, we talk about acceptance and commitment therapy. And that's something that I started practicing for myself, apart from, luckily I could just get CEUs in it and it would apply to my practice, but I needed it desperately for myself after becoming a parent, and then struggling with postpartum, and not feeling like I had the support that I needed, or not even understanding what it was that I needed, how to ask or advocate for what I needed. And so when we talk about that present moment, it's also about, like, hearing your thoughts and feelings and emotions, and those are behaviors too, right? They're just behaviors that are only observable by yourself, right? And trying to detach yourself from those and look at them as an observer, right? And you can say, maybe where did this come from? And okay, well, most of our thoughts and feelings are there to help keep us safe. But maybe it did keep us safe in childhood, but it is no longer necessary. We're currently safe, so
it doesn't serve a purpose anymore.
Right. And we can say, oh, thank you, I hear you, but that doesn't serve a purpose right now. And then what you look towards is, deciding where your values lie and what type of life you want to lead, and then you look towards moving in a committed way towards acting and behaving in a way that aligns with your values. And so you can have those thoughts and feelings, and you can observe them and measure them, and but then work on being very present in the moment, and then taking your actions and committing your actions towards a values-based led behavior.
For me, I found that, like, journaling it out really helps me work through emotions. Also, getting outside for at least 5 minutes a day.
Definitely.
Without my phone.
She's on this rain. So great to finally.
Oh my God, today was beautiful. We played outside. I filled up his little pool. It was great. But yeah, I feel all of that, honestly. That's really cool. And acceptance, that was the ACT. We just touched on that. Any other notes that you wanted to mention on the ACT, or?
I don't think so. I
feel like you brought up, you're very, like, specific with your points, but they're all so educational. So,
I don't know that, like, I had any kind of agenda or, I guess just sort of like, or things that I wanted to talk about necessarily, just the idea that like, it all comes back to really having curiosity, right, and compassion, whether it's curiosity and compassion for the way that that child, your child, or a client that I'm working with, whether how that child is behaving, having curiosity, why are they behaving that way?
Yeah.
Using a scientific approach to observe, and science is all about curiosity.
Yeah.
So why are they behaving? What is it getting them? What, in what context do they behave that way?
Right.
And then what happens right afterwards? What are they getting access to? What might be reinforcing that behavior?
Yeah.
What might be causing them to continue to behave in that way?
Yeah, I find that so intriguing also. I feel like my brain is it works in a very similar way to like the ABA approach, because I do find myself really chasing after like patterns and like looking for those things. Like, okay, like I noticed he cries and is like clingy if I'm like on my phone a lot while we're trying to play or something, because I'm like multitasking work or whatever. So then I'm like, okay, like I need to find a better time to get my work done, because this is not enjoyable for him or I. It's like counterproductive because I'm trying to get work done but I'm not getting anything done because he's crawling all over me, and he's obviously having an unenjoyable experience. So we just need to like we need to pivot and like do something different. Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
That's great, being able to assess, what we do, if you were to work with me as a parent coach, we would look at that. We call it ABC behavior, which, the ABC's behavior, ABC data, which makes it really easy to remember. But look at what we call the antecedent, the behavior and the consequence. Right? And so if the behavior you're describing is he's really clingy, he's whiny, and we would kind of break that down to be like, okay, what does that exactly look like? And so that when you're observing it, I'm observing it, we're observing the same behavior.
Got it.
So we would make sure that we operationally define it. Then we would look at what happened directly before that. So in what context does that behavior typically occur? And
Gotcha.
Said we look for patterns. So you said, oh, it's when I'm on my phone, right? So your attention is split, right? You're trying to attend to him, also doing stuff on your phone. Not quite, you might be doing some work. And so, your attention is shifted, your attention's not on him, your attention's sort of removed or split. So you know that in that context he engages in this behavior. And then you probably put your phone down and attend to his needs, because naturally crying behavior, whining, fussing behavior is a way for him to get his needs met. And so you immediately provide attention. So he's learned pretty quickly, when mom engages in this behavior, then I can cry and whine, and then I'll get her attention. And then, we kind of look at that. We look at that pattern. We figure out what's maintaining the behavior under what context, and then we work to shape that behavior. But if you want to decrease a behavior like crying, whining, clinginess, you never want to decrease the behavior without replacing it with a socially significant function alternative. So a function-based alternative. So if using that example, the function of that behavior is to gain your attention. And we might even break down that further to say, like, what form of attention? Is he wanting to be held? Is he wanting to be talked to? Is he wanting to be, touched? Is it sustained eye contact? Is it silly facial expressions? Is it tickles? Is it play? So like we look at attention with regards to proximity and eye contact and facial expression, body language, and touch and voice. Is it loud?
So interesting. So many things to think about.
Is it like you're just saying like one or two things to him in a very short way, or are you saying something to him in a more conversational way? I had one parent that would engage, culturally this made a lot of sense for her, but she would engage in a lot of questioning. What do you need? Are you thirsty? Are you hungry? Do you want to be picked up? Can I give you a hug?
It's like question loading,
And it's funny, so what you do is you take, this is what it looks like, right? And that's where it really becomes individualized. You can say like, behavior's maintained by attention. A lot of kids' behaviors maintained by attention. But the individualization comes in like, under what context and what does the attention look like? Right? And that's specific to the caregiver and the attachment they formed. And then we take that and we apply it to a different and alternative socially significant behavior. And we say, like, how can they get that same access to that same form of attention with a behavior that's more, quote unquote, appropriate?
Okay,
So
gotcha.
can he tap you to gain your attention?
Oh, okay.
Body behavior.
Gotcha.
Could he exchange a picture icon?
Yeah.
Right? Is there a cooing sound or a noise? Maybe he engages in a cooing or a noise that he makes before he begins engaging in the crying and
Yeah.
whining. And that we call a precursor behavior. So
Got it.
it occurs pretty consistently prior to the target behavior.
Right.
Decrease.
Yeah.
And so we start reinforcing the precursor behavior. So we can reinforce sort of lower intensity behavior.
Got it.
And then work to shape out the really high intensity or the maladaptive behavior
Yeah.
that's,
Not desirable. Yeah.
Yeah. Causing difficulty. There's a lot of critique, and so I stumble upon my words
Yeah.
because we say maladaptive behavior, but then it's like maladaptive to who, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
to you, but
Yeah.
it's clearly adaptive for me,
Yeah.
as the learner, as the child.
Right.
We say challenging behavior, but once again, it's challenging for you, but the autistic person engaging in
Right.
that behavior, that's not challenging.
No,
for
it's just
them.
second nature for them.
So,
Yeah.
It's also about perspective, and so
Gotcha.
there's a lot of criticism as to what we call those behaviors that we target for decrease, and
Yeah.
why we target them, and whether it's even socially significant to target them for decrease.
Okay.
So really, that flip side of the coin is that we're working really hard to work on targeting functionally equivalent behaviors
Yeah.
for increase.
Yeah, that's
So,
really interesting.
The cooing, the
I'll
tapping,
have
the eye
to
contact.
try that out sometime. And I also feel like as a parent, you have to know like your personal triggers because
If
the way
you
you
can't emotionally regulate, then you can't help that.
right, no, you're not helping anybody. And I think too, so like with the phone example again, I found that like my anxiety or my frustration would increase because I'm not getting what I would hope done. So it's just
Right.
better for both of us to like eliminate the multitasking sometimes depending on his mood or like the flow of the day.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. I'll have to try like the tap option just for like so he has like a way to like get my attention, like you said, without like going completely AWOL from the start. Yeah.
I mean, not to say that your child is an animal.
Yeah.
But your child's an animal. We're all
I
animals.
mean, I keep telling people that they're essentially just really smart dogs.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
I mean-
Because I had 2 dog trainers in my master's program.
Oh, really?
And I think it's so cool when you look at that, just behavior change in general.
Yeah, the synchronicities of it. It's very similar.
So, and I actually had parents when I was in my master's program. I had a parent who had, I noticed that was happening. So
Yeah, it's all right. I gotta redo this table. It's a mess.
I had a parent who had a young child with autism who I was doing home services with.
Okay.
He also had Down syndrome, so there was a comorbidity there. So there
Gotcha.
he was a very high needs, high support
Mhm.
child. And then at the same time, she had 2 other children as well. And at the
Oh,
same
wow.
time, she got a puppy. She was like, I don't know what I was thinking.
That's a lot.
This is just so much work for 3 kids and a puppy, and she's got a job,
Yeah.
and her husband's got a job, and she's doing all the things, and then she's reading this puppy training book to try to teach her puppy, not to pee in the house, and
Yeah.
to eat the food in the bowl, and not spread it all over the house,
Right.
and not to jump on the furniture, not to jump on people, and she came over to me and she was like, "Geez, if you just like replace doggy treat for goldfish crackers, basically what you're doing with my son."
Right, yeah.
She was like, not to be crude. And I was like, no, it's more complex than that, obviously.
Yeah.
A human's behavior is much more complex.
Right.
But,
At the root of
yeah,
it, it's
and
really not that different.
on a very rudimentary level. And
Yeah.
this is a child who relied primarily on, we say edible reinforcement, but on
Okay.
that primary food reinforcement.
Gotcha. Okay.
And was learning, his social skills were minimal, and he was learning to accept conditioned reinforcers,
Yeah.
which is like social reinforcement, right?
Okay.
We're not born necessarily knowing that a high five is reinforcing, right?
Right,
And across
yeah.
cultures, it's not necessarily. But
Yeah.
we're conditioned to understand that, like, hey, certain praise.
Yeah, or
and certain-
clapping or whatever
Yeah.
is exciting.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
So cool.
it definitely goes across everything.
Yeah, so cool. Well, all of that was very knowledgeable, but I am very eager to wrap up the episode with diving into the trauma-informed care.
Absolutely.
And so, what are your top tips for guiding parents to develop the skills, compassion, and empathy that you mentioned while allowing space to heal trauma and reparent themselves in the process?
Yeah, so trauma-informed care has such a big umbrella, and it really should be something that, any person caring for another person is taking under consideration. And I think when we look at, I think we can look at it from two different lenses. One is like, as a practitioner in the field of autism services, right? We know that there are so many autistic individuals that have come out and very vocally expressed the trauma that they endured from ABA services, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
Or from a variety of services. And
Yeah.
so I think one is just acknowledging that we're a young field, we're a growing field, a rapidly growing field.
Very fast. They're popping up everywhere.
Yeah. A young field, a rapidly growing field, and we are learning. We're learning as we go, and made some mistakes. And we have some tools in our tool bag that just aren't best practice. They're not good. And we have lots of other tools in our tool bag. And so making sure that when you're reaching, you are coming out with something that is not going to cause harm, right? That you are really focused on assent-based care.
Yeah.
And then the other lens of that is that, whether it be a parent that you're working with or a child that you're working with, everybody comes to the table with different history. And you might know that history, you might not. But if you approach it from a trauma-informed lens, then you are already coming in with compassion and making sure that you are being respectful of the trauma that they may or may not have endured.
Yeah.
Right. And so, when you think about like what happened to you, and how are we going to move forward from there?
Got it.
And really just making sure that you're using a reinforcement-based approach.
Yeah.
And we talk about, when you talk about reparenting yourself, you want to look at things. You want to be compassionate towards yourself from a trauma-informed lens.
Really.
Say, like, that happened to me, but it doesn't define me.
Yeah, I think it's so important for people to take a step back and take that time for themselves to, like, really reflect on, like, you don't remember all of your childhood, but I feel like as a parent, as you experience different things, you definitely are triggered by different experiences, and it's worth looking at when you feel that way.
Yeah.
Because you just never know where it's rooted from.
Yeah. And you don't have to sit in the past as much as just, and when we talk about acceptance and commitment therapy, you just want to accept it, right? It happened, it's there, I hear you, I can see that thought in my head, or I can feel that emotion coming to the surface, and have compassion for yourself when it occurs, right? You know that like certain behaviors that your child might engage in, and so when you're talking about behavior change, whether you're a practitioner or a parent, you're dealing with two different parts, right? You're dealing with the child engaging in the behavior, and how do I manage that behavior in order to reduce it, or reinforce other adaptive behaviors. But also in that moment, you're dealing with your own emotional well-being and trying to regulate your own emotions in response to that behavior.
Right.
And nobody's a robot. Nobody's
No.
perfect. So
definitely not.
you have to kind of weigh like, okay, what's best for both of us in that moment as a unit? How can I best support them while also supporting myself?
Right.
And, we look at it from a practitioner's point of view, or when I'm coaching parents through stuff, in that moment, maybe what the child needs, right? And we talk about building a secure attachment. We talk about, practicing ACT. We talk about trauma-informed care. You want assent-based care, and how do you get that? Well, you build a history of reinforcement. You build trust. Is really what you're building. The connection. And when sometimes what you need to do is just pause in that moment and say, like, forget about that.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna hold you.
Right.
And I'm gonna co-regulate. Right. I'm gonna regulate myself.
Yeah.
And while I'm doing that, I'm teaching you how to regulate yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, what is that doing? You're picking up, you have a child whose behavior is maintained by attention, and you're picking up your child and you're snuggling them and you're breathing with them and you're talking to them and you're helping them regulate. And are you providing attention to a behavior that's maintained by attention?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so hard to find that balance sometimes.
Are you reinforcing that behavior?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But when you think about that short-term reinforcement versus the long-term effect that it will have, it's always connection first. And
right.
It's always about making sure that everybody feels safe and secure.
Right.
And get to a point of calm, and then work in other moments to teach those other behaviors.
Yeah.
And that really is like making sure that in that moment you are connecting with yourself and with the child.
Yeah.
And you can do things. There's all, you get into the nitty gritty of science of all of it, but you can reinforce low rates of behavior. You can reinforce low intensity behavior.
Yeah.
You can provide low quality reinforcement. So I'm gonna hold you and I'm gonna breathe with you, but I'm not gonna engage in a lot of excitable attention.
Yeah, right? Like singing or things of that nature.
Right, and then once they're calm, maybe then you begin to engage in that. But then on the flip side of the coin, right, when they're not engaging in tantrum behavior or crying behavior or whatever the behavior is that you're targeting for production, on the other side of that, you're providing high quality attention or access to tangibles or whatever the function of the behavior there are for general functions of behavior, but you're able to provide lots of access to that in a and satiate them with it in a different environment, a different context. And so I think it's just about, you gotta make sure you got those connections.
And I think connection, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I feel like at the end, or the root of it all, connection is so huge for, again, creating that safe space and that trust. Because I think it was my friend Jess, probably the owner of Elevated. We have had like a rough year with sleep. It has not been like the best sleep year. We're progressing now that his molars finally broke through, but it was like just a really hard year, and I felt like it was never going to get easier. And she had given great advice of, first off, like, you're doing great with like lack of sleep, but also you have to kind of like eliminate the expectation that he's going to be exactly like other babies his age. And also, oh my gosh, where was I going with this? Connection. You're the yes. You, at the end of the day, like, you're his like safe, like you and Josh are like his safe people. Like, you're the only people in the world that he knows. So it's like, when you think of it like that, you're like, wow, like, that's crazy. Like, yeah, you're crying in the middle of the night for me, but who else are you going to turn to? Like, it's weird to think about it in that way. And I think it's hard.
If he didn't cry out for you, that's because he's not feeling safe and secure. Similar to my daughter had a regression of potty training. She was hiding her underwear. You want to create a safe and secure place for them to feel all their emotions. And unfortunately,
how did that go?
That's us. That's us parents. And if for some reason that goes awry, and they're not reaching out for us, whether it's as an infant crying in the middle of the night for support with their emotions as they try to sleep, and regulating back to sleep, or whether it's a 4-year-old, 5-year-old having poop accidents, and she's hiding her underwear because she's not telling you about
it. Oh my gosh.
You need to be a safe haven for them to come back to,
right.
And the way that you build that is through consistency.
And for sure.
And I had to back up and say, like, it's okay. We all have accidents, because my initial reaction was like so frustrated.
Right. Like there's poopy underwear all over my house.
I'm exhausted.
Right.
Like, I'm exhausted. You're up again. You were just up an hour if you can pause for a moment and think, again, values-based,
Yeah.
right? And you say, like, okay, I'm hearing my thoughts, and we try to detach from those thoughts and feelings, and I'm hearing my thoughts, and it's not helpful right now. And, you want to move forward and say, what are my values? I value the connection with my child.
Yeah.
I value, their ability to turn to me for love and care and support when they need it. And so, thank you for those feelings, but they're not helpful right now.
Yeah,
and I'm going to, commit to acting in a way, to behaving in a way that moves me towards my values.
Right.
To make sure that I can maintain that connection with my child.
Yeah.
So for me, it was all about backing up to be like, it's okay, we all have accidents.
Yeah.
We all struggle. You need to listen to your body. How can I teach you better? Listen to
Right.
your body.
Yeah.
And, we got past that, and she, of course, would ask me for help then if she had had an accident.
Yeah.
And that was really important.
Go you.
Yeah.
Way to crush that battle.
And then the same thing, like, you wake up in the middle of the night and you're exhausted. But,
Yeah.
you know what? It's a privilege.
Yeah.
It's a
Right.
privilege.
At the end of the day, it is.
I'm
Yeah.
able to comfort him, put him back to sleep.
Yeah, and it is a really cool thing when you find that balance. Yeah, you find that balance and you like establish that connection, and you find your groove finally. Maybe not because you're aware of all these ABA things that we now know, but it's cool to feel and experience them like calming down with you.
Yeah.
And one interesting kind of like transparent takeaway. I remember at some point in like the early beginnings of our experience, we would have. Well, I think it must have been when we went back to work. I was just going through our like values and notions with like his bedtime routine or nap routine, and one of the things was like making him feel safe and just like comforted by like just gently rocking him before we put him down. Yeah.
Don't really practice that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm kind of like a routine freak sometimes, though, so it's to a fault at some moments. But I was just trying to like make sure everyone was on the same page because, like you said, consistency is huge when it comes to things. Whether it be like something as simple or maybe not as simple as sleeping, or like trying to reverse or reinvigorate like a different habit or whatever. And it was like my mom specifically, and she's like, "Oh, like." Just put him down to bed. Like, you don't need all that lovey stuff. Which is, at the moment, I was like, ouch. But also, I was like, okay, like, I'm not going to say anything because that's, like, just her upbringing and her trauma. Like, she maybe did not receive that in her parenting experience. So, like, she doesn't see the need for it. Whereas, like, I really valued creating, like, that connection and, like, safe haven space through, like, the gentle act of, like, rocking or singing or whatever. So I kind of just, like, let it be, but it was, like, okay, like, now it also becoming a parent and, like, seeing my mom become a grandma has been, like, a whole new, like, different light, too. Like, I feel like I needed to experience that from her because I think her upbringing was just, like, their love is, like, so transactional. It's, like, so different than what I'm trying to approach. Yeah. So I think it's, like, kind of reinforcing us both in a different way, which is kind of cool to witness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I think it's really important to also know that no way is necessarily the right way.
Right.
That's what feels right for you.
Yeah, which is amazing to say because I feel also when it comes to, like, especially with your first child, there's, like, the cry it out theory and, like, you're not supposed to cuddle because it'll reinforce, like, the habit of crying and, like, being clingy or whatever. So it's so hard because if there's so much access to all the information, it's really hard to kind of get comfortable with your own flow. Yeah. In a way. Yeah.
And that's part of, like, that mindfulness, too.
Yeah.
Like sitting with your thoughts and feelings and, does this feel right? Does it not feel right? And if you, can kind of identify that, like, ick.
Yeah.
Like, and as a parent, but also just, like, once again, parenting and this duality of where I'm both a parent, but I'm also a parent coach and a practitioner working with young clients. If I feel like something is it's not sitting right with me, like it doesn't feel in aligned with my values, I had that ick feeling, it's okay to pause, reevaluate, right, and then go, but like don't push through it. Yeah. It's okay if we're gonna risk, from the scientific lens, reinforcing this behavior in the moment to be able to adjust. Yeah, take that moment after the fact. Sure that, it's better that you're behaving in a way that's in line with your values, than a way that's maybe scientifically correct.
Right.
And, you know, we aren't robots. Again.
Yeah, definitely not. Not yet, anyways. This world is getting kind of scary with all the robots.
No, not yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, my like notes here, you know, establishing trust, rapport building, establishing connection, making sure that the child feels secure. Part of that, when we talk about routines too and consistency, is that it establishes the expectations and it allows for predictability.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a huge part of security. For me, I'll get super anxious about, maybe because I was in Boston for 20 years, but I get super anxious about parking all the time.
Oh,
so
really?
when I'm going someplace new, I feel like if I don't know the parking, I'm like, what's the parking situation?
I get like that when it comes to cities. If I'm going to like a store or something, not as much, but I definitely get parking anxiety.
Yeah. It's like, what's the situation here? Am I going to pay for it? It's going to be hard to find a parking spot.
Right.
Do I do extra time? Like all this, and extra time just is not in my vocabulary.
Me neither. I try, and then I have this extra time, like, oh, I could totally bang out those dishes quick, and then I still am 10 minutes late.
Absolutely. I can put dinner on the crock pot.
Yeah, right. Just kidding.
Yeah, I don't know if that's part of my behavior that I'll ever be able to change.
Yeah,
We try.
Yeah.
I had some perfect parenting. Okay. But where were we going with that?
Parking anxiety.
Jeez,
Oh, shoot. Who knows? Any other, or you were just reviewing your notes? Maybe that was something?
Establishing rapport, teaching emotional regulation, providing. Oh, I recall.
Yeah.
Okay, so having routines and predictability.
Oh, yes. There we go.
So I depart
Love a good routine.
So when I can't predict what the outcome is going to be, right? I drive up through Boston all the time. I feel perfectly comfortable driving in Boston. I'm happy to go to the Science Museum because I know what the expectation is.
Right.
As long as you know the expectation.
Yeah, I feel like that's big for me too.
So, you know, when we talk, you know, to bring it all the way back around to communication. When we talked about that in the beginning, like being able to communicate your wants and needs, being able to teach a child from a very young age how to self-advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
You know, what do I want? Is it like, do I want a hug? Do I want access? Do I need food?
Yeah.
Right? I think the best way you can care for yourself and you can emotionally be able to be available to emotionally regulate is to get your immediate needs met. So like, listen to your body and be like, oh, actually I have to pee. I'm going to pee now. I feel a little hungry. I should eat something. Wow, I'm thirsty. I need to drink something.
Yeah.
Like just listening to those basic things in the body. And so teaching children to also listen to that and communicate that. Like, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, I want a drink, I need a hug.
Yeah.
You know, also like, I don't want that. Right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
Put me down. Let me go.
Yeah.
I don't want to play. No, thank you. Right?
Right.
And it can be in a polite way, right? And in a conversational tone.
Yeah.
But teaching those self-advocacy skills, I think, is also a huge part of teaching mindfulness. So that they understand, like, what's going on in the moment. They can really relate to their own bodily needs, their own bodily functions. It's a huge part. I love teaching communication. The second best thing I love to teach is potty training.
Yeah.
Because I really think, you know, communication and self-advocacy and then potty training, it really, there's such socially significant skills that really give the child their humanity.
Yeah, right.
And so those are two skills that are huge in my practice.
Yeah. Communication is big for me too, or like learning ways to communicate. And even for Cameron, he's only a year and a few months. I don't know, I stopped counting after I had to take the monthly photo. I'll never know exactly how many months. I'm terrible with numbers. But I find that like talking through situations with him, like, oh, you're very frustrated right now. I'm trying to like calm you down by holding you and rocking you and singing your favorite song. However, you're not pleased. So I'm going to go ahead and put you down because I can't help you when you're acting like this. Yes. So even he has no idea what I'm saying, obviously, but I feel like for me, it allows my brain to kind of like process the moment and like be present for myself. Yeah. But then I'm attempting to express to him also like, okay, like you're really upset, but I can't help you. So I'm going to put you down for a second and we're both going to take a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I think Dr. Becky Kennedy actually talks a lot about that And she talks about how people need to know that they are seen, they're heard, they feel real.
Yeah.
And so validating, I hear you. You said this, right? So like reflecting their observable behavior back to them. Like, I see you're upset, you're crying. You don't want that. You really wish. That's a phrase that I've used a lot.
You really wish.
Really wish.
Write that down.
You really wish you could have ice cream for dinner. That is not a choice right now.
Gotcha.
Right? Here are your choices. That's another big part of trauma-informed care is allowing choice.
Yeah.
Right? Which, it can be controlled choices, especially with the young children, but you still have some control in, right? Do you want to brush your teeth with the bluey toothbrush or the car toothbrush, right? Do you want to use this toothpaste or that toothpaste? Do you want mommy to do it first or you do it first? Should we do the top first or the bottom first? I mean, you can just layer upon choices upon choices upon choices. Of course, sometimes too much language can be confusing.
Right.
But, utilizing choices, making things fun. Sing while you do it, dance while you do it, make a game, using laughter. Is always a great way. And if you don't have willing assent, pause, reevaluate, how can I get that back? And making sure, we talk about every adult gives informed consent. But our children don't know that or know how to do that. So we have to recognize the signs of assent. And, are they smiling? Are they making eye contact? Are they laughing? Are they, moving towards us or moving towards the thing we're asking them to do, right? Are they willing participants in this? If not, we need to reevaluate. And figure out how to manipulate the environment or change the contingencies so that they are willingly, participants in whatever it is that we're doing. So I love that. And like talking yourself through it, like, yes, I hear you, you're crying. Mommy's trying to comfort you. Do you want me to rock you or maybe bounce you? Rocking and bouncing doesn't seem to be working. Maybe I'll lay you down and see if you want to be left alone. Right? And like, and then maybe he calms down and there you go.
Like, that's has been happening. He'll just finish his bottle and then he like wants nothing to do with you. Sometimes he'll snuggle, but then he'll just continue barrel rolling in my arms like, okay, I think it's time to put you down now because this just is not working.
It seems like you really wish you were
laying down.
Laying by yourself. Right? Not being held, right? And, so I think even if your child is not understanding, it's such good practice to get in the habit of, because when they get bigger and louder, you might be less sleep deprived, but it's just different problems.
I can only imagine,
then, I mean, I'm not perfect. Again, imperfect parent.
Yes,
And my children ask if I could maybe swear a little bit less.
But I'm gonna have to worry about that soon once he starts talking.
They don't swear. They just would like me not to.
Gotcha. Well, that's good. Another parenting win, I guess.
Just show passion. Usually it's when I stub my toe. And so.
I feel that. It just comes. It comes out.
But, you're dealing with these heightened emotions. You're trying to regulate your own emotions, and so if you have this script that you can kind of fall back up in your head that you've practiced, then you're more likely. Once again, you're creating a reinforcement history, and you're more likely to engage in that behavior in the future. And so you're setting yourself up for success in so many ways.
Thank you. Yeah, it definitely has felt good to do that, and I think because my proactive habit to work through things is journaling, it just seems to work for me because I'm just basically journaling out loud, whether it be just for myself or to benefit both of us. But I mean, I think this was all fantastic, whether you're a parent to an atypical child or someone on the spectrum. You can check Lauren out. It's Imperfect Parent Coach, and then
gmail.com is how you could email me.
Feel free to email her for tips or to get plugged into resources. I'm sure you would be a great resource person to contact. Or what's your regular handle also, so they can follow you on there?
So I'm at Lauren Burhans or at Imperfect Parent Coach which
All right, cool. And I will make sure I put those both in the description. Anything else you want to shout out as far as like resources go, maybe for parents?
So, if you feel like you need one-to-one support and want parent coaching, whether whatever challenging behavior, I specialize in sort of birth to age 7 or so. Feel free to reach out and I'll do a free 20-minute consultation just to make sure we're a good fit.
Cool.
If you want to look up some resources, I mentioned Dr. Becky Kennedy.
Yeah.
She is just
I'll have to look into her,
resource with regards to parenting. You can, for ACT, The Joy of Parenting is such a great, kind of introduction to ACT with regards to parenting.
Okay, is that a book, I'm assuming?
Yeah, that's a book.
Got it.
And then The Attachment Nerd. That's where I've, started to learn all of this about attachment, style attachment parenting. She has a book coming out soon.
Okay. Is that her Instagram, Attachment Nerd?
Attachment Nerd.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Her name is Eli, I think.
Ooh.
But she's the Attachment Nerd on Instagram.
Neat.
She's amazing. And then I'd love to shout out my friend Mallory. Who is an amazing ACT practitioner. She's also a BCBA.
Okay.
And we chat frequently and support each other in parenting and in our professional practice as well.
Mm-hmm.
She works specifically with BCBAs or with organizations, corporations, and she utilizes ACT, to prevent burnout.
Oh, okay. Which I feel like is huge for that field.
Yeah.
The turnover is crazy sometimes.
Oh, and she's so good at what she does.
That's
Honestly,
awesome.
I'm probably just thinking about it.
Oh.
She's so good at what she does. She's at Mindfully Mallory.
Okay, Mindfully Mallory. I'll make sure I put all of these in the the description for easy access. Yeah.
And, always feel free to contact me.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for offering all your expertise and your time tonight. She's a mom of 3, so this is a big deal to get out of the house on a work weeknight. So I appreciate your time.
We're reading Harry Potter.
Oh, I love it.
So we're just about to start book 2, so we're really
so fun. Well, we'll make sure you get home for that. Thanks for tuning in, friends. Toodles.